Hey everyone, this is Chris and Sandy with the Customized Ride, where we spotlight people within the car industry. And you know what? Today we got a great show for you. Who do we have?
We had John Myers. He has an extensive background in auto mechanics, electronics, woodworking, welding, upholstery, lighting, and more. And he is presently the senior global trainer for Kicker Car Audio.
And we're excited to have him on as our very first guest, but many
Yes,
more to come on the Customized Ride. So welcome to the show.
welcome.
Fantastic. Thanks for that warm welcome. Man, you really talked me up there. I hope I can live up to all that.
So I always like to talk about people's stories and all that when we interview. A lot of, we'll hit about a little bit about Kicker and all that, of course, through it. But I always like to hear people's stories. And the last couple years, though, has been rough for a lot of people within any industry. How did COVID affect what y'all do as a company and you as a person?
Well, that's a double-edged sword because as a company, it was phenomenal for our business. Sales went through the roof. I mean, we couldn't make enough product. And the reason being, with COVID, people couldn't travel. They couldn't go out to eat. They couldn't go to movies. And they get these stimulus checks. They're making all this money. What are they going to do with it? Car audio. So we absolutely loved it. But on a personal standpoint, me being, a global trainer, well, I'm used to being, out in the territory with dealers and reps, training them in person. To have to switch to doing this, via Zoom or, Teams or any of those, online, it was a little different. And it's really hard to judge, the crowd, if they're feeling what you're feeling, you're conveying the message without being able to see them in the room. So it changed that quite a bit. So I'm glad that we can get back to traveling. And I just like being out with the people. I mean, I always learn stuff, all the car shows and events, always seeing cool things because it's so diverse. You'll never see it all. Even if you go to every event, you will never see it all. And there'll be some stuff you're like, where the hell did that come from? It's like, but hey, it's kind of cool.
Well, in your years that you've been doing all this, is there any build that kind of stands out where you're like, wow?
We could do a whole show every week on that. There's so many out there that were just so over the top and so cool. I mean, I can't really put my finger on one single one because it's always the one you're looking at that time, which is the coolest. And that's one of the things I always try to do, with our projects and when I do, installs for myself is I'll take bits and pieces from everything else and combine it in a different way to, make something totally new and different. But, being involved in so many high-end builds, if I would have to pick a personal favorite that I've been involved in, it'd probably been one of the overhaulings where we did the Hummer for CNN that we restored. That thing was amazing, and to be part of that vehicle that sold at Barrett-Jackson, I mean, it was crazy. And you see these people, they ask, hey, are these things as nice underneath as they are on top? You're cutting a lot of corners. And I got to tell you, working on these TV shows, you get to see the people from the companies that are the best in their industry. So you learn from the best, and no one cut corners on those vehicles. We did a little running tally of what the chassis on that vehicle would have cost, just the rolling chassis without the body. We came up about $180,000 just to get the chassis to the point it was. So, those vehicles are always over the top, and it's really cool to be a part of something that, people get to see. Unfortunately, you generally don't get to hear them. Yes, the TV shows, they don't always play the audio, but, you definitely get to see the vehicles and meet a lot of cool people.
You know what's funny? Because I'm 51 years old, and I've been
You're just young.
And I've been to a lot of the car shows and meets locally since October, really getting my hands dirty and all that. And I was talking to somebody, and I was like, there's a lot of people around my age at all this. And he says, oh, that's because your age is the only ones that can afford it.
Yeah. That happens too. That's what my wife says about old guys in Corvettes. Like, well, they can finally afford it. Now they can't enjoy it because they're too old to get in and out of them. So. Guilty.
Yeah, there was a guy that had an old, I think it was 53 Ford truck or something like that anyway. And he was at one of the car meets, and he was probably in his mid 60s, mid to late 60s. And we were talking. And I remember him talking about he just got this back after 6 years. I mean, of it being, he said it's been his dream to build something from scratch. He's like, got it back after 6 years. I was like, oh, COVID messed things up? He says, no, an a-hole did.
Yeah, that's very typical of builds. I mean, actually went to lunch with a good buddy of mine that runs a car show up in Kansas. And he was telling me about one of his friends that finally got a vehicle back that was at the upholstery shop for 3 years. Wow. So, you got to pick the right people. And, if you got that kind of time, it's not always bad to take it to someone that, hey, well, you don't have to pay storage for it, for one, but also they take their time and sometimes get a lot more work than, what you're expecting, a lot better quality work than if you're just absolutely got your, knee in someone's neck to get something done. It becomes, almost like a thorn in their sides. They just want to push it out and get it over with. But if you give some people time, you can get a lot of really good work out of some, really good people for, pretty affordable price.
Yeah, because that was like one of the last car meets went to us talking to someone, and he said that's been one of the problems that they're running into with almost any parts on vehicles is there's a waiting time right now because of everything.
Oh, yeah.
And so although you have the money and all that, he says if something goes wrong, you can't fix it overnight like you used to.
No, that's definitely true. I know, being involved with an audio maker, manufacturer, we've got parts. Some of these parts have already been on order for over a year, and we still don't have a date when we get parts to make some of these products. So it gets really frustrating because we see the cool stuff that's coming, but we don't know when we're going to be able to get it out to the public because getting parts is crazy. And the weird thing that happens is sometimes the parts are delayed so long that in the meantime something else changes. Then you got to go back and redesign and validate the product for the new part or the new manufacturer. We've had that happen on a couple of our projects, which sent us back almost a year, starting all over again just because they went out of business.
So how do you deal with that with the supply chain? Do you?
I don't.
Do you wait till you have everything before you start the build, or do you build and then get as you come?
Well,
because if you build and then something changes, then you got.
And that's exactly what we do, and that's how you have to do it, especially with the parts that we call long lead time, where you got, a 40 or 50 or, 100-week lead time to get parts. You have to start in that product because if you wait till the part's available, then obviously, you got to put an order in. Well, they might be sold out again. And then the other thing is that, technology changes, so you really got to, plan for a product and plan ahead. And we've got several projects that, we just recently give the okay to go ahead and order the long lead time parts. So hopefully we can have it available by next year.
Wow. So how did, let's take you way before Kicker. How did you
back
get
there?
How did you get started in this whole industry?
Boy, you're really taking me back. When I was younger, I'm talking elementary school, I would find speakers and stuff that people were throwing out or didn't want. I just started experimenting with them, setting them in different places in my bedroom, pulling the speaker, the raw drivers out of the cabinets and just kind of messing with them that way. And I've always, liked woodworking. So I took all the woodworking I could get in junior high and high school. I liked drafting, so I like to draw. So I took some drafting, and I like cars, so I took auto mechanics. Wow. So I'm fortunate enough that I found a job that I could, really use all those, basically to me, it's like being able to take your hobby and turn it into a career that you have fun. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. In fact, they always give me a hard time because my vacation pay is almost always maxed out because I don't take it. I don't need to.
Yeah, that's like with me, I love the talk, so I love interviews. So from the other show that we do, and then this one, we're hoping eventually we get paid to do all this. And so I'm trying to turn what I love to do into a career. Yeah, and it's really cool. And the way I really got started installing, this is actually kind of a funny story, is because, I'd been playing with this stuff all through junior high. I had a neighbor that I still remember. It was a white 1966 Buick Electra 4-door, big old land yacht. And he was out there messing around, trying to get a radio put in. I hear all this cussing and swearing out of my bedroom window, on Saturday afternoon. So I walked out, and he's like, I can't get this blankety blank. I looked at it, it's like, it's 5 wires. That was back with the old Craco radios, and Craco was a brand. Oh, yeah. It literally was a power wire and 4 speaker wires, and everything was grounded to the chassis. But I figured, 5 wires, how tough can this be, So I get the thing playing, and he looks at me and whips out his billfold and hands me $20. Oh, wow. When 1979, $20, and when you're 13 was a lot of money. It's like, oh, you can get paid for doing this? So... And it was really interesting back then, in those days, every single car, you had to cut every single harness. You had to cut the dash to put every radio in it. Wow. It's not like,
today when you've got these kits that literally, just snap into the dash like some of the GM kits, you match up the wire colors and plug it in. And there's a lot of that happens, not always, but that's kind of the norm anymore where, when car audio first started, it literally was, you had to be a fabricator, you had to be a problem solver, and you had to have tools, and I'll tell everybody right now, tools make the job. Having the right tools makes the job better, it makes it go quicker, and they make you more money in the long run.
Probably if you hear an installer complaining about any of the kits, you probably want to slap them.
Well, I've had my day of complaints. Some of the kits are not very good, so that's the nice thing about being in retail. You kind of learn and you talk to people like, hey, don't use that one. It doesn't fit. It doesn't look right. So, but companies are really pushing the envelope to make sure that if you do have a kit for a vehicle, like Metra, they make these kits that you basically have to reinstall the air conditioning controls. They have their own LCD displays, their own buttons. Once you take the radio out, because a lot of the vehicles, you control a lot of the functions of the vehicle through the radio. So if you take that radio out and put an aftermarket in, you lose that. I mean, Dodge is a perfect example. I mean, I've got a couple Dodges now, and if the seat heaters, the steering wheel heater, the air conditioning, all the climate controls, all done through the radio. So if you take that out, you're kind of sunk. So they got to stay in. So you got to be a good problem solver and what to do. In fact, some of the mid 90s Hondas, they actually ran the power windows and cruise control through the radio. So if you took the radio out, it didn't work. So in the meantime, what people were doing was basically extending the wires and putting the factory radio either somewhere back behind the dash or under the seat to keep those functions working. So you have to be a problem solver, and that's what I like. It's something different every time. It's a challenge. So, you're only limited to your imagination.
So ever have any challenges with Toyotas?
Oh yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what vehicle. There's always challenges. So, but Toyota's definitely mainstream now, so they're not too bad. And our engineers do a great job of developing products that drop right in, that you don't have to do extensive modifications. They, they fit. They're not too deep. You don't have to make spacers, or some of the speakers we actually include the adapters to make them fit in these vehicles, which I sure wish I had when I was doing installs every day, because I had to fabricate adapters every time we did something crazy or different. So there's a lot of companies out, Mobile Solutions, Brian Schmidt, he offers, all kinds of tools and adapters and materials that, are basically not specific to car audio, but, car building and car fabrication in general. He really is a great source to go out and find those products, the tools that you need to get the job done.
And that's great that you have that at your disposal now. Like you said, back in our day, you just didn't have anything, and you had to learn, because, I've done a lot of installs when I was younger for my own stuff, not for other people, but for my own stuff. And I tell you, looking back now, I done some really stupid stuff, but they worked.
So have I. And I've always said with car audio, you can do everything exactly right. It'll sound pretty good. Or you can do everything wrong and whoa, that actually does sound good. It's crazy the way things all work together. But you talk about doing stuff back in the day. That's kind of like tinting windows. I like the way tinted windows looked on cars. So I had a '66 Mustang was my first car, and I decided I wanted the windows tinted. Well, I don't have enough money to pay someone to do it. So I got some window tint. I did it myself. And I remember how I got into doing that. The guy came up to me and said, hey, who tinted your windows? I'm like, I did. He's like, really? It's like, yeah, I know. He's like, hey, I'll pay you to do mine. Would you? Would you be willing to do that? It's like, You'll pay me to do that to your car? I'll take your money. So it's just kind of fun, how you get involved in some of this stuff. And, some of it, like anything, I try to learn as much as I can about how to do things. If I want it done, I will tell you, being in, the automotive industry, there are people that just don't always know what they're doing. And I'd rather not take the chance if I don't know specifically. So I'll try to do stuff myself first. And I know when I'm over my head, but then I also know the right people to call, to bail me out when I need it. So having a good network is also very important.
Exactly. I remember back years ago when I was, 18, 19 years old, I had a little Mustang 2 hatchback model.
Sorry.
And
Mustang guy.
When you say you have a Mustang, people are like, oh, wow. No, it wasn't what you think. It's old Mustang too. And
I think 74 to 78 was that Mustang year.
Yeah, I think it was a 78 model, as a matter of fact. And and we had that. and didn't have, like you said, didn't have money to buy anything. I had a good radio, had a couple amps and all that. I'm like, well, what am I going to do about speakers? I don't have no money. And me and my friend of mine was looking in my house, and I had two 15-inch house speakers, both in boxes. And I'm like, we were like, I wonder if we could do something with that. So we took those things, box and all, didn't take them out of the box. We put them both in the back of the hatchback. Then we took a bunch of wood, built a box around those boxes to make like a Fifth Order type box before Fifth Order was a thing, and made some ports and all that, and crank her up and let's see what happens. And
that's why this all got started.
And people were like, what do you got in there? Oh, a House 15s. Oh no, there ain't no way. And it was funny because one night around midnight was at my house, and you got neighbors. I'm like, but we're working on everything. Like, well, I'm trying to fix something, and I turn up, turn down. So you'd hear one bass note, turn up, turn down. And next thing I know, my neighbor, who loves music now, walks over just about midnight, and he says, look, I love your music, but when my bed is moving across the floor at midnight, we got a problem.
I think you got something going on then.
So what are some crazy things you went through?
Oh, I've been through one of the vehicles that we were working on up here. You were talking about that, and it just popped into my mind. We were working on one of the first cars I worked for at Kicker. It was a 55 Chevy panel delivery, and it was chop top. It was full custom front rear. It was all, neon, park lights and tail lights and turn signals. I mean, it's really cool. The front was reversed, so it actually hinged from the front. It flipped forward, had a big old 454 with two carburetors on it. But it was a street rod. I mean, it was all, orange and purple, and it was, it was really cool. But the original person that did this had what they called flamethrowers. So that's where you rev up the exhaust, you flip a switch, it kills the ignition, but you got spark plugs in the tailpipes that light the raw fuel. So we were out there after doing the audio system in this car, so we figured we want to pull it outside to see how it sounds. It was like 1, 2 in the morning, and so we're playing with that flamethrower. We'd rev that engine up, hit that switch, and it'd start shooting flames out the back, and pow, 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 pow. Next thing you know, we're sitting there, we look kind of out of the corner of our eyes, and we see a couple patrolmen kind of pull up, kind of off the corner of the parking lot, and on the other side, kind of, without lights on. We're like, okay. So, they finally came walking up, and there's like, hey, we heard that, there was some gunfire around here. Have you guys heard anything? It's like, that was probably me. He said, well, what are you talking about? So I told him what we were doing. He said, I thought you were welding, because he saw the flames, and it's like, yeah, so getting arrested for welding and gunfire while you're doing car audio. So.
What's funny is I seen a video recently, I guess a few weeks ago, where they did a short, and they played a cop that came up. They had a car that did that went pow, 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 and all of a sudden 4 or 5 cop cars showed up, and they about pulled them out the car thinking they had guns, and they tried to argue, and it's funny because they went back and forth and say, no, it's the car. They said, there ain't no way that's a car. He says, do you want me to crank it up for you? And he says, yes, you have to. He cranked it up, and then after it was over, they all laughed, and the cops left. They said, be careful because you're going to get shot.
Yeah, you never know. Someone might mistake that. One of my best friends here in Stillwater is a retired police lieutenant, and he's a big car guy. I mean, he's a car fan. He's got a lift in his front yard. That tells you how much of a car guy he is. And the guys that I first knew when I moved into Stillwater, actually, one of them is Dominator from Street Outlaws. I met him, basically the first day I moved to Stillwater. He was, best friends with one of the guys we worked with who became my roommate. But they apparently, like to do the street racing thing way back then here in Stillwater. And my buddy, the police lieutenant, was, really a car guy as well. And he said it's really tough, when, you're a car guy, but you got to go out and bust these street racers, and you want to ask them about their cars. You want to talk about their cars, but you're there to do a job. And he said, then you get the one guy that doesn't have a license, so then you got to put him in handcuffs. And he said, it's real tough to talk cars when you got one of the other guys in the back of your car in handcuffs. You're taking him into the joint. So, it's just, it's a lot of fun, and there are people that enjoy all different, types of, car customizing, audio, video, lighting, engines, paint. It's just really cool to be in this industry that you can pretty much do anything you want, just obviously within reason, as long as it's safe.
And that's what's great about the industry, I think. And I think that's where the industry almost gets a bad name. A lot of people outside the industry don't understand, but there's all walks of life, all ages that are in, because it doesn't matter if you like hot rods, you like classic cars, you like low riders, you like raised vehicles. There's
something for everybody.
And what's great is, and again, you've got a few people that down each other, but in most cases, the community itself loves each other.
Yeah, it's just it's so much fun to be a part of it. And like you say, there's so many different avenues. You don't have to be pigeonholed into just one thing. So it's a lot of fun. It really is. It's been a blessing to be able to do what I love, and someone actually pays me to do it.
So tell us how that happened. How did you become to work at Kicker? I mean, tell us that story.
It starts with a long line of retail. Like say, my first job as an installer was when I was 13. I would literally be driven to the shop on Saturday, hang out at the stereo shop to see if anybody need anything put in, on that Saturday or during the week. They'd actually bring their cars over to my parents' house, and I'd do the installs in the driveway after school. Yeah. And from there, it progressed to getting a job in the mall, selling audio in the mall. And car audio back in, 1981 was not what it is today. Actually, 1981 was the year Kenwood first made car audio, so that tells you how long ago that's been. But I remember, hanging out in the car audio section, always playing with it and talking with the guys. And finally, the store manager came over and he said, listen, he said, we don't know anything about this car audio stuff. You seem to know something about it. And he said, we don't like talking to the kids. They come in and they annoy us, but hey, you are one of the kids. You want to come in and try to sell some audio on the side. So that's how I really kind of got focused on car audio, because, all my buddies were coming in to buy stuff from me, and the other guys, they didn't understand car audio, and they didn't relate to the younger crowd. They were the typical old salesman with the big wide ties, and and it was a whole different environment. So that's kind of how I got started doing that. From there, did a little bit of electronics in school, in a trade school. Started my own shop in 1988 and had that for 4 years, sold that, and then I went to work for Kenwood, actually with a little brief stint working for a company called Nebraska Furniture Mart selling audio. But worked for Kenwood for 3 years, and then I ended up at Kicker about 26 years ago. So definitely like where I'm at now.
You must really love it to be there, 26 years. And that what's cool about that is you've seen a lot of changes in the time you've been doing this. What do you think about where car audio is going in the next 10, 20 years? And do you think the whole push for EV is going to slow it down?
The EV thing is kind of interesting. We'll get to that one in a minute. But, up until about, 5 years ago, car audio was really taking a downward spiral. People weren't spending the money. We have something we call just good enough. You buy a car, it's making noise, it's just good enough. I don't need to spend any money on that. So people that, really focused on, like IASCA was, the International Auto Sound Challenge Association, where they actually judge cars on sound quality, on install. That kind of went downhill, not because it was expensive. I mean, you had to spend a lot of money to do this. And to people out, a general consumer that listened to one of those cars, they wouldn't like the way it sounded. The thing about those cars, the best sounding cars were so flat and sterile. There was no excitement. And this industry really is about excitement. We don't sell car audio at Kicker. I mean, that may come as to a shock to a lot of people. We don't sell car audio at all here. What we sell is emotion. And what conveys that emotion is the car audio, the music. You remember, it takes you back to a concert you went to. So, and then it got to be the SPL where, loud as you could make stuff for a while. It didn't matter what the vehicles looked like. You'll see a lot of those in SPL events. People just bolt speakers everywhere. And, that was me. Kind of the Mad Max of car audio. But that's a lot of fun. But now what's happening, especially with the internet, and I really, I'm not a huge Facebook or, Instagram guy or that. I don't, focus on those things all day, every day. There's times I go maybe a week without even checking Facebook. But what they've done is there's some, groups out there like the Clean Wire Club, which, is all about how clean can you make your wiring, because I've seen some absolutely atrocious wiring jobs out there. And there's another one called Carbide Cult, which, carbide, the kind of, tools, carbide tip router bits and drills. It's a site for high-end car audio installs. And what, these sites have really done is they challenge people to be better, and want to put really good work out there in front of everyone. And it's really starting to pump the popularity back up. We're seeing a big, swing towards more sound quality, not so much the quantity, which we still do that as well. Obviously, we're Kicker, that's what we do. But the upswing for, making vehicles sound, phenomenal. And there's a big difference between something that sounds good to your ear and something that sounds accurate. In car audio, there's something called imaging and staging, which you should be able to shut your eyes and picture where the instruments are, in front of you on a stage as if you were at a concert. So, back in the 80s and 90s, you just had pretty much left and right. There was no time alignment, no digital signal processing, but it sounded pretty good and sounded pretty loud, but it didn't give you that concert experience. And that's what iAsk has started to do. We started to basically, the whole point of car audio is to make the car disappear. I mean, that's the real purpose of car audio. Is you just want to picture you're at a concert, you're not sitting in a vehicle. Right. So that's the challenge on making a vehicle that has a really good, accurate image and sound stage. And some of these vehicles, like one of the guys that worked here that was my boss for a while, Mark Eldridge and Gary Biggs, those guys were some of the top competitors in the industry. I bet you Mark's 4Runner probably had well over $300,000 invested in that vehicle, over its lifespan.
We got a 96 runner.
Yeah, it's crazy what you can do. That thing we actually put speakers out by the headlights, firing back in through the engine bay through custom duct work that and that's the type of work you had to do back then to mechanically get that good soundstage. Now you can do a lot. In fact, I'm going to quote Ernie back here behind the console. Ernie's always said, and it is true, to get a good image and soundstage, there's two ways. You have a really good processor or a really good install, or both, obviously. But you got to have one or the other or both to really get what we call a true sound quality accurate vehicle. So
it's funny.
It's a challenge.
Somebody asked a question for Sandy and I, talking about how did we meet you, and it's funny that you asked that because we just started the customized ride October and started really doing a lot of shorts within the car community and stuff, and then we do another show where we interview people. So I wanted to bring that concept to the customized ride, and I've been watching a lot of different content out there, and I was like, who would I want to be our first guest? Who would be great? And I've watched.
And then you got John stuck Meyer. With me.
Yeah, and you're actually the person I picked because I was like, I like your interaction with people on your show, Unmasked, and all that. And so I watched all that for several weeks. I'm like, he's really good with the camera. He's funny. He's really what I would want as a first guest on this show. And so I just reached out a couple weeks ago. We got him, and I talked to him on the phone about a week ago. And so really the first time we've met is like right here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I've seen what you look like. I knew what you sounded like. And it's funny because the person that asked that question, Andy McGill, Andy actually has a social media site called the Kicker Club on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
That is dedicated just to Kicker, and it's where you can go and ask questions of people, about, what should I use? This is what it's doing. What do I need to do to fix it? They're always, posting pictures of installs. So, the Kicker Club is another great, social media site that's really helping, perpetuate this whole car audio craze that seems to be going on now. It's getting really cool, and it's a lot of fun. It can be a challenge with some of the new vehicles, and that's one of the things I do, as a trainer here at Kicker, is I teach interfacing, which, how to make, the aftermarket electronics work with these new vehicles without disabling safety systems or, some of the crazy things like that.
So how is it going to work with EVs, or can it?
Yeah, I almost forgot to come back to that. EV is going to be very interesting. There's a push right now to bring the EV market up into 16 volts. Now, if they push it up to 16 volts, almost 100% of the car audio out there, I mean almost 100%, is probably not going to work at above 16 volts. They're designed to work, with a 12.6 battery and a 14.3 volt charge system. Our amplifiers are actually designed to shut off at 15.5. That's so the voltage doesn't damage the internal electronics. So if the EV market is going to continue to push towards that, we as a manufacturer, and obviously it's been talked about already and a while ago, we're going to have to come up with products that will work on those vehicles. It's kind of like start-stop. The whole start-stop thing where you pull up to the stoplight and the vehicle shuts off. And then you let your foot up on the brake and it starts again to help conserve energy. When that vehicle starts back up, you go from 12.6 battery voltage. When that starter kicks in and pulls 300-400 amps of current instantaneously, that voltage will drop, sometimes as low as 6 volts. Most electronic equipment, aftermarket equipment, shuts off at 10.5 or sometimes 9.5 volts. So we had to develop a whole line of products which basically are start-stop ready or start-stop compatible, so they will actually stay on down to 6 volts or even in some cases a little bit below, just so you don't have a bad experience. So it's really interesting, the integration and with the new technologies that are out there, that how we've had to change what we do. Because that start-stop, I mean, that was a big challenge. The 16-volt EVs are going to be another challenge. But, right now with some of the EVs that are out there, I know the Teslas, I mean, there's guys out there doing killer systems in those. They still use a 12-volt battery that's mounted somewhere to run the audio system off of. But, the bigger the audio system you have, the more power it requires. And, if you got a limited amount of battery space in the vehicle, you're going to shorten the range on it. But that's okay. We don't mind.
Yeah, because that's one thing about the industry is, you've seen through the years, you've had to grow and you've had to do all this changing. So change is going to be constant. I've always been, I always ask people, when I'm out and about, what do you think of the EVs? And so far, I haven't found any car person that loves the idea.
Well, it's weird that the owner of Kicker here, he's got a little Tesla. He absolutely loves it. And Steve's so funny. I think Steve's 73 now. He's the founder of Kicker, and this is our 50th anniversary. I remember when he got that car and took me for a ride in it. Steve used to race go-karts. And, of course, with that battery being really low in that vehicle, it's got great, low center of gravity, so it handles really well. So I remember him taking me for a ride in front of the building, little S-curves out there. I'm like, Steve, you're going to get pulled over. You keep driving like this. He said, just reminds me, racing go-karts when I was a kid. So... And, of course, then the Tesla, he had to show me the fart app. We had a lot of fun with that, for playing with that. But it is really interesting, and I'm not sure where the whole EV thing is going to go. I mean, I've got my ideas and my concerns, but, time will tell.
Yep. Now, as you know, a lot of people may see the glory in everything you do, that you're around this car industry, you get to be right in the middle of it, but they don't see the grind it takes to go to the top in the industry, but even in the car industry. So tell us a little bit about some of the sacrifices you've had to make to even get to where you are today.
Well, and you're right. It is a lot of grind. It's a lot of work. Anytime you hand fabricate stuff, I mean, Bondo, fiberglass, any of that, I mean, it takes time to do that versus just buying something off the shelf. And that's what, you really have to be ready for. When I first started working for Kicker, I mean, we pretty much started at 7:30 in the morning, and I bet you I was here 7:30 in the morning till midnight, sometimes 7 days a week for weeks in a row. I mean, absolutely loved what I was doing, but, and I'm not saying that everybody does that or you have to, but that's just the way it worked out for me. I didn't know people, I just moved here and I loved doing it. So, even if I wasn't doing, work projects, I was working on somebody else's car, making a little extra cash on the side. So, but, brings about another very, interesting and fun story. Start talking about this, because I've been doing this for about a year and a half, every weekend, almost every night, working on a vehicle. And talking about Steve, I ran into Steve in the hallway, and Steve's like, so I hear you are up here at nights and weekends working on people's cars. I'm like, uh-oh, am I in trouble? And you don't want to lie to the guy. I mean, you just, the minute you meet him, you realize, what a neat person he really is. But Steve's like, well, my car stereo quit working, and, you don't have to if you don't have time, if you don't want to. And I'll pay you, of course. And he just kept going back. It's like, but if you don't have to, if you don't want to, it's like, what's wrong? He said, well, my car stereo quit. It's like, well, when did it quit? He said, about 2 years ago.
Wow.
What? Well, I don't want to bother you guys. I know you guys are busy, and, if you don't want to do it, it's like, give me your keys. So, yeah, you can't look at this job as an 8 to 5 job. You know, if you look at this like I'm going to get rich doing car audio, more likely you're probably not going to. You know, you're going to get rich with experiences and, you know, stuff you get to do and having fun, but it's not a, you know, absolutely huge money-making thing. You know, some of the reps make some pretty good money out there that are selling the gear, especially, you know, with the whole COVID thing. But it's a lot of work, and it's really satisfying. The reason I like doing this kind of stuff is because it's instant gratification. You do a stereo system for someone, and, you know, they come in and they listen to it for the first time. You see their eyes light up. Or, you know, that's what's worth it. That makes all the extra hard work worth it. I mean, I usually quote people, you know, per hour rate, and that ends up going by the wayside because I start doing more stuff just because I get excited about doing it. So I can't charge you for that. You know, that I wanted to do that, but, you know, I do that almost every time. So you really have to love the industry, and you can't look at it as 8 to 5 because a lot of the events and stuff you go to are on the weekends. So.
Yep, exactly. And you know, talking about that, you know, we go every Saturday. We're at some car meet. There's always something going on. Tomorrow, most of the car meets have gotten canceled because we got a big rain all day, so we won't be doing that. Tomorrow will be the first one we went to in months. But there's always something going on. So it's almost like, and even when I'm out and about, if I, you know, as a content creator, if I see a cool car, well, I've got to get film of that. So it's almost like that, even though we have work hours or whatever, we don't have work hours, because if I spot content, I got to be on it. But I love it.
Exactly. And that's the joy of social media. And there is no, you know, 8 to 5 set rules for social media. You're running cool stuff all the time. So yeah, it's really interesting, but you always got to be on. In fact, you talk about, you know, the car events on the weekends, you know, that's a great place, you know, for, you know, people out there, you know, get involved in some of these, a lot of stores, you know, malls and stuff do, you know, like Cars and Coffee. We do one here at Kicker the last Saturday of every month. We have a little car show here, and it's just a lot of fun, and you get to see a lot of different things. And I really like, you know, like the Cars and Coffee events because they're not judged. Anyone can come, and it's all free for, you know, the public. Just come, you know, see what people brought.
And it's great because, you know, that's every Saturday. There's always one somewhere within a radius of where we live, and within an hour. So we're always going to the Cars and Coffee, and it's amazing the stuff you see, and different cities that we go to see them. You always see different types of rides too. So you're like, okay, you can see what's popular in that area, and what, you know, like on some, really you're like, there have been some I've gone to, and I'm like, man, there's like 6 Corvettes here. I was like, apparently people love Corvettes.
Yeah. I remember going to the Cars and Coffee in Atlanta when I was there a couple years ago, and when you see a whole row of 16 Lamborghinis, you know, at a Cars and Coffee, it's just a whole different world. But I mean, they'll typically have, you know, they said, you know, somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 cars at these events. It's the whole shopping, it's a whole mall. It's about their whole parking lot. But it's really cool to get out and see what people do to cars. I mean, I used to judge, you know, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that to your vehicle, or, you know. But anymore, it's like you did something. You did it yourself. You spent money on it, you know, and that's what's cool. Take pride in it. I get a lot of dealers and people that want, you know, put me in their vehicles and, you know, actually hurt me with how loud it is. And I've worked on some of the loudest vehicles in the world, and, you know, that's, you know, when you're trying to hurt someone, it's not, you know, pleasurable. But, you know, the guys that come up and say, hey, you know, check out this stereo system, you know, I got in my car, and it's like, great, you know. How it says, well, you know, I paid this shop down here, you know, $5,000, whatever, to do this install. And then you get the kid that comes up, hey, you know, I had, you know, $100 here, $100 there, and I kind of built this over time, and I learned how to do it myself. That is more impressive to me than a guy that just writes a check out and has somebody do something. So, you know, knowing that, hey, you know, this may not be the best you've seen, but this is what this person could do, and they actually did it. I mean, that's what's really, you know, more exciting to me, rather than the best of the best of the best. It's the people that actually get in and want to learn, and that's what I love about, you know, what I do is, you know, if they got questions, you know, I'm there to help them. And if I can offer suggestions and help them take their skill to the next level, that's what I do for a living.
Love that. And as you know, a lot of people may see you because you're kind of the front guy to everything I've seen anyway with Kicker. But people don't get a chance to kind of hear about the team that is kind of behind you. And it's in our opinion, teams never get any love. On our show, anything we do, teams always get some love. So take a few moments and just tell us about the team that helps you be who you are.
Well, there's actually about 225 people, in this building alone that if it wasn't for them, we couldn't do what we want to do. But, doing the video broadcast, you got JW, you've got Sandy, you got Ernie, you got Bill, all back here, running cameras and running the whole production. So they're the ones back there making me look good. Not that I probably do look good. But even in like the training department, there are 4 of us in the training department, and we all kind of specialize in a different area. Writing presentations, building, display models or things to show, at events. We got, of course, Carlos speaks Spanish. He's the only one that speaks Spanish. So it really takes everybody to get together to do what we do, and even the marketing department. Designing, some of the background logos and everything we do. I mean, no one person can do this all themselves. And we really have a great company. Like we mentioned, I've been with this company, almost 26 years, and I think I'm only 23rd in seniority. There's 23 people that have been here longer than I have, and I think the average tenure is 11 years. I mean, that's the average of how long people stay here.
Wow.
So it's all about the people.
I love that. Now, speaking of teams, we have a third co-host, our little 11-year-old.
And he's becoming a car.
He's becoming a car person.
Good.
And audio enthusiast.
We always bring him on to ask a couple questions, so Sandy's going to go get him.
Yeah, I'll get him.
Uh-oh.
He'll want him new questions now.
I will.
And hopefully he
put me on the
remembers
spot on
new
this one.
Yeah, it's funny. Hopefully he remembers the new questions because he has certain 3 questions he always asks on our other show. But because this is a car thing, we're trying to gear it towards that.
This is awesome. Kids are the future of everything, so.
And it's funny. The other day he told us, he says, I know what I want when I'm 16. We're like, what? Because, and after he gave us this answer, I'm like, we go to too many car shows. Because his first answer was, I want a Corvette.
That's usually the go-to. And a lot of or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari.
Ever since we were at the Columbia Cars and Coffee, Columbia, South Carolina, and I was filming this guy going by with the Corvette, and he stops and he says, film away. And then he says, he's seen my little son with me because you want to sit in it? He said, uh-huh. So he sat, so ever since that, he's one of the.
That's awesome. I actually had an experience kind of like that. We were in Las Vegas, doing one of the events. I think it was SEMA. It was in March, and they had a NASCAR race there. Wow. And you could go and do the ride-along where you actually drive the NASCARs. And I remember going out there, and doing the ride-along, which is really cool. You get a ride in a NASCAR 165 miles an hour. But I'm driving my buddy's Viper, and I pull up. There's this guy standing about 20 feet away, and he's kind of looking. And it's like, I finally motioned him over. I said, can I help you? He said, oh, I just wanted to see the car. I didn't want to, bother you. It's like, no, that's, come on, see the car. And he's looking at it. I'm just like, well, what brings you out here? He said, well, I wanted to go for the NASCAR ride-along, but he said, I can't get in the car. He physically could not crawl through the window. Oh, wow. So I said, do you think you can get in the front seat over here? And he had this big look. He's like, what? So I put him got in the front seat of the car and took him, driving around a little bit around the infield.
Oh, wow.
And it got done. He said, well, my buddy's just got to go ride a NASCAR. I got to go ride in a real, Viper. So, it made his day. So it's really cool, where you get those experiences and you just learn, that, hey, everybody's got different wants and wishes and,
exactly.
Go for it.
All right, hi, Kicker. So what's your first car?
My first car was a 1966 Mustang. It was a 200 straight six. It was a 3-speed on-the-floor manual transmission without a synchronized first gear, which means you had to stop to put it in first gear. So 20 miles an hour. It didn't have enough torque to go in second gear, but you couldn't put it in first gear till you stopped. So that was my first experience with cars, and that was one of 3 Mustangs that I've owned in my life. The first one was a 66. Same year as me. But the car looked better.
Gave me legs. I was gonna.
Oh, you was gonna talk about that?
Yes.
But tell them.
All right. Okay. So, what's your dream car?
Okay. Pardon? My dream car? I can't actually put anything on that. I actually think about this quite a bit. So you win the lottery, what would you buy? I don't think I could have any one car. I don't think I could ever have enough. I mean, I like the big performance sedans. I also like, sports cars. I mean, I'd have to have, a different car in every different type of group. You'd have to have, your favorite SUV, your favorite, sports car, your favorite, sedan, your favorite touring car. So that is a tough question. It's hard to say. I mean, I really like some of the, I do really want. I actually got to see the unveiling of the 1,000 horsepower Shelby Mustang when they introduced that. That would be a fun car to have. I think I could definitely handle that because it's still practical enough that you could drive it every day if you wanted to. But it's got the performance. I don't think I would ever own a Lamborghini, Ferrari, some of those because
you can't
it wouldn't be something. Yeah, and with the roads that they have, you don't want to tear the front end off of them. I mean, because, hitting potholes and stuff. So I still like something that's somewhat functional that, at least the Mustang, you can get 4 people in it if you really had to. They're not too bad in the backseat. I actually rode in the back of a Mustang on the Hot Rod Power Tour for 1,500 miles, and it wasn't bad.
Anything
But
else?
good question.
No.
What's your dream car?
Oh, my dream car was a Corvette. Everything.
Yep, Corvette.
A Corvette.
I told him the story about you got in that one in Columbia.
Yeah,
Or
I was fortunate enough to get my hands on a Corvette a few years ago, and I loved the car the way it looked, but I had to sell it because it hurt so bad. It was built for the racetrack. I mean, it was a 99 C5 with the full GM T3 suspension. It had a roll cage, 5-point harness.
Oh, wow.
The car looked beautiful. It ran great, but you get out of that car after that, you just physically hurt.
Especially us being older guys.
Yeah, but the newer Corvettes, the C8s, and the 7s, I mean, the suspensions on those cars are so good. One of our engineers has got a new Corvette, and those cars really, really do ride really nice. So, but, you can only get 2 people, and it can't get much luggage either. So not very practical, but that's why I say I'd have to have something that was practical, for some things, but yet something you go out and have fun with. But
Exactly. All right.
All right, bye, thanks.
Hey, thank you for asking.
So through the years, have you had any mentors that kind of helped you guide the way, and who were some of them?
Actually just about everybody I've been around, that's given me the chance to play and experience and, to learn from. So there isn't one person in general. I mean, it's an industry that the people are few and far between. And, growing up in car audio, I mean, there weren't a lot of people that specialized in it. So you learned what you could from who you could. But there's just a lot of really, really cool people in this industry, and it's a pleasure to be working with them side by side.
And you see that as you've aged in the industry, that you've become that for the younger generation.
Well, if that's the case, that is a great honor, and like I say, hopefully we can continue to do that. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I hope people keep buying car audio because I don't want to have to go get a real job. I love what I do, so.
Yeah, because none of us really know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, talking with some of the people I've talked with, and knowing what I know, that I think it's going to be impossible to have enough electricity for the cars by 2035. So I kind of believe that we're probably in good shape for our regular cars for at least another 30 years.
Well, you and I have the same opinions then. I didn't want to say that, that it may not be politically correct to say that. I don't think they're going to work, but yeah, we're already overloading the charging grids now. And, I grew up, in Nebraska and then moved to Chicago. And I've been snowed in on interstates, for, 8-10 hours at a time. So you can imagine sitting in an electric vehicle that's all you have is a battery. And you're trying to run a heater, which takes up more battery, it's going to come to a point where it's going to get real cold real quick. So the Midwest people, I don't know. It's just, they're not for me. I like my sound of my V8s and my turbochargers and superchargers. I mean, that's what I like. And, you just don't get that. In fact, Bora has got a product out that they actually have 2 6x9s and an amplifier that mount underneath an electric vehicle to make it sound like it's got an actual engine in it. So it's kind of funny that they do that, but even like the Fords with the EcoBoost with those turbo 4-cylinders, and even like I've got 11 Mustang right now, even that car, they've got things that they do to bring engine sound into the car. Like the EcoBoost, it's digitally inserted into the amplifier, so it's digitally put in there. With the Volkswagens and some of the Audis and like the Mustangs, they actually have a tube that goes from the air intake of the engine that goes back to the firewall to convey that more engine noise because some of the cars just don't sound as big and beefy as they used to. And it's part of that experience. You see it, hear it, smell it, and breathe it and live it. So yeah, electric cars.
Because it's not the same. It's just not the same. You don't hear. That's like on our the Customized Ride YouTube channel. when we do shorts, the things that take off the most I've noticed are if I caught a car revving the engine.
Well, at the Cars and Coffee events, and a lot of the car shows, they bring out some of these big dragsters, and they have cackle-offs, they call it, where they get these big nitro funny cars, and that's all they do is they start up those big huge engines and they rev them up, and talk about drawing crowds of people. You're just not going to get that with an electric vehicle.
Exactly. So, as you look into the future and all that, what do you want your legacy to be? You've been doing this for many, many years. So what kind of legacy do you want to leave as you end your life down the road? Way down the road, let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope too. But, I don't know. I just, hope I educate people and help them achieve their goals and what they want for car audio. Because I've always said, there is no right or wrong. People ask me, what's the best speaker to buy? Well, it's like going to the car dealership. What's the best color of car to buy? Well, what do you like? So, if I had anything to leave, it's like how people could, learn to experience what they want. Learn what they liked, and then how to get it and how to achieve that for themselves. So that's kind of why I'm a trainer.
So what's the best piece of advice anybody's ever given you through your life?
Stay in school, I think, was probably the best advice. And, education is very important. You've got to learn. And, I still, to be honest with you, I still go to school whenever I can. We do like MIRA events, Mobile Electronic Retailer Association events in the past, and now they're called, Knowledge Fest. And I still go sit in on other manufacturers' classes and demonstrations, and you learn every day. Never think you know everything, because there's always new technologies, and the more you learn, the more viable you're going to be in the future, and the better equipped you're going to be, both with schooling and abilities. My major downfall is I grew up in the days of hands-on stuff, and now it's all about, CNC, computer programming, and, having the ability to cut stuff out with the computers. And I've kind of missed that. So here in March, when we go to this Master Tech Expo in Phoenix, I've actually signed up to go to some classes to learn more about CNC. So,
wow. And you know what, the great thing about in this day and time, see, back, 20, 30, 40 years ago, when you said you want schooling, you really had only a few white collar options. That was about it. Now there's so many more options than just regular college, so, and I like that, there's trade, as trade with all the different stuff there. I mean, there's technical stuff within the car audio. So it's a whole different world that we're in.
Yeah, there are actually specific schools for high-end car audio.
Wow.
that teach nothing but fabrication. That's kind of the event we're going to in March in Phoenix, and it's called the Master Tech Expo. It's put on by Brian Smith that sells all the tools. He actually has week-long classes that you can learn to fabricate with CNCs. You can learn to upholster. You can do lighting, pressing wire mesh speaker grills from scratch, designing your own, using magnets for fasteners. I mean, it really is interesting, but I kind of had to learn as I went and put everything together. And that's why I say I took a lot of woodworking, a lot of electronics. In fact, I couldn't take any electronics in high school because it wasn't offered. So I took that in a trade school. But auto mechanics. I mean, anything you can learn about tools and hands-on is only going to be a benefit to you in the future.
Yeah. So where do you see Kicker itself going into the future?
We're actually going to be obviously riding this wave as long as we can. We're going to continue to evolve, and we've got projects that we're looking at clearing 25 and 26 now that we have to anticipate what's going to happen. But audio is always going to be a part of people's lives. It's just what avenue and how are we going to get that into the vehicle, and that's one of the cool challenges. It's not cut and dried. It's not written in stone. It's not this is where it's going to end. We're not going to let it end. If we do go down, we're going to go down kicking and screaming.
You're going to kick with Kicker, right?
Exactly.
I really enjoyed having you on the show today. And we hope that for updates and all that down the road, you would love to come back.
Oh, absolutely. It's really been an honor. And especially when you said it was your first guest and your first choice, I mean, that really means a lot to me. And I really appreciate that. And anything I can do to help, I mean, I live, I breathe, I eat. This is all I do. My hobby is car audio and messing with cars. This is my profession. And that's all I think about, when I'm, at night. So if I can help people, get what they want, within their budgets, or, get the sound they're looking for, because you may not know, you have to experience different things. With audio, and especially with, speakers, and having a good, medium that what we call a transducer, it changes forms of energy. So speaker is a transducer. It changes electrical energy into mechanical energy. It's kind of like an interpreter. If you don't have a good interpreter, you don't have a good transducer, you're going to miss a lot of the conversation. So if you haven't heard a really good high-end car audio system, I don't care where it is, you need to at least listen to it. I mean, you may not be able to afford, that particular, but listen to the possibilities, because if you don't know what's available, you'll never know you want it. A good example is one of the guys I used to work with, one of our old, managers for the training department. He didn't know till he was 16 years old that he was red-green colorblind.
Oh, wow.
He didn't know it till they did one of those, eye tests that's got the blotches and the different colors. He had no idea till he was 60. So he didn't know what he was missing, or that he even was missing anything. And that's the same thing with car audio. If you don't hear a really good system that really conveys music the way it should be, if you just hear it on an average system, and you'll never know what potential is there. And that's what makes it fun and a challenge.
That's like with little Chris, his very first vehicle that he sat in with major bass, so to speak. We were at a car audio shop, Extreme Audio of Hinesville. And we were at a little event they had going on there. And it was I think it was a Suburban, if I'm correct. But it had 6 18s in it. And that
probably was a Suburban.
But that was his first, I know it was an SUV, but it was a big SUV. But it had 6 18s. The whole bed was, there was no back seats, of course. But that was his first experience of any type of bass. And so he was like blown away.
Yeah, probably literally, his size and with all that bass going on. But you're right. I mean, that, in itself is an experience. It's not, you're not just listening to car audio at that point. You are experiencing it with all of your senses, the smells, the feels, the sights, the sounds. So yeah, it truly can be a, phenomenal experience that, people love. And that's why this industry, it's never going to go away. It's just going to probably streamline a little bit. It's get a little more technical and, a little bit more challenging with some of these new vehicles, but we're not going away. You can't get rid of us. People love their music.
And let's face it, it doesn't matter how bad the economy gets, people are going to do stuff to their vehicles.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I found that, after being in this industry for a long time, the target audience that we have, the 16 to 25-year-olds, they don't care about the economy. They don't care what it's doing. As long as they got a job, they're spending money where they want to spend it. So that's very good for us.
I love that. Again, we really enjoyed having you on the show today, and we look forward to having you back down the road.
Anytime, I'm ready for it, because it's always fun talking about car audio and the past and the future. So we might have some new, really cool stories to tell about things that have happened between now and then.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think I'm losing your audio there, Chris.